to change his mind, but he had insisted. So they had just held their breath coming into this.
Sunday. I woke up late and had homework. Hang on a second. Allow me to explain this. I've decided to document myself for the entirety of this year as a way to pressure myself into making every goal I have a reality. I will create small goals along the way, each week or so, and I'll create a few bigger ones to complete in the year. For example, I'm going to read at least one book by the end of every month, or at least finish a book, considering how many I've bought only to read the first chapter. I will also swim my first swimming marathon, 8 kilometers, during the first half of this year, and my second running marathon, 26.2 miles, during the second. I will record every struggle and revelation I have along the way. I'm so excited and can't wait to get started. This is my vlog. This is the place where action meets the dream. Welcome one and all to the meaning in between. Where was I? Oh right, Sunday. I woke up late and had homework to do for a 1-week class that begins the next day. I'll be taking a class about Christian and Muslim encounters throughout history. I'm excited and nervous for a few reasons.
Reason one, I've been an atheist for the last few years, and I'm now just re-entering my Christian faith. I'm still trying to grasp its true purpose and my place in it.
Reason 2, I have been raised in a post-9/11 Islamophobic world. Side note, this vlog is not in any way intended to be political. I'm just speaking of the general uneasiness around and basic misunderstanding of the Islamic faith. Anyway, it's kind of embarrassing to admit this, but I have always disliked Islam. Not the people, just the religion, to be clear. I have seen them as hateful, radical, and no good most of my life. It wasn't until a few years ago when I read a book called Man Seeks God where I encountered the specifics and the beauty of the Islamic religion, in the form of the Sufi mystics. I've since changed my tune and been highly fascinated to know more about the faith. This class was my chance. My first mistake. Caffeine at 1 p.m. Light roast, to be specific. My second mistake. No workout. This problem will be a trend throughout the week. I know my class is going to be all-consuming for the next 5 days, so I decide I'll ride my bike back and forth for a workout instead of my typical run and lift cycle. Plus, my new workout routine that I built to include my swimming training doesn't begin until next week, so this week will just be a lot of off-the-cuff, winging it kind of workouts. So I dust off my bike, add some lights, and I ride to school to see how long the trip takes. Now the trip is all the way across town and I narrowly avoid being hit by a car, so I decide it's back to the drawing board. I tell myself I'll get up and run at 4 a.m. and I'm off to sleep. And by sleep, I mean lying in bed until 1 a.m. staring at the YouTube screen of synthetic rain and thunder until my brain dies of understimulation. As it turns out, caffeine afternoon equals junk sleep. New rule, no caffeine afternoon. Monday. I sleep past my alarm at 4 a.m., so no run. I take a cold shower, get ready, and grab some coffee. I make it to class with plenty of time to spare. Class begins, and I'm already intrigued. My first revelation.
Part of me feels maybe a little lucky that I wasn't totally aware of 9/11 when it happened, because now that I'm learning more about Islam and about Muslim culture, I'm actually learning and I've been learning this for the last few years, but it's actually much more peaceful than we're led to believe. And those are just radical claims that the radical claims that led ISIS to do the things they did have similarities to radical claims within the Christian Bible. What is accepted as canonical Christian biblical verses in the Old Testament have led to things like the Crusades, or have led to Hitler was a Christian who believed what he was doing was right in the eyes of God. He was killing the people who killed Jesus. Was he not avenging Jesus' death in a way? That was what was happening in Hitler. I'm not justifying Hitler at all, but that was what Hitler thought in his head. Is I'm essentially avenging Jesus' death. So it's just horrible things have been done in the name of Christianity, backed up by certain biblical verses that you could argue were misinterpreted, in the same way that ISIS and Islamics have done horrible things in the name of their religion. And it's just interesting. I don't know if it's that it was more recent, or if it's just that in the West we don't have as much Islamic culture over here, so we're just not as aware of it. So like maybe with Christianity, we're so familiar with Christianity, and we were so familiar with Christianity at the time of, you know, the Nazi reign, that we could tell immediately, oh, they're misinterpreting the Bible, oh, that's an extreme example. But over here, we don't understand Muslim culture as much, and so when we saw it, that was the first big public representation of Islamic culture, and so we kind of branded it on them. So that's the first thing we think of when we think of Muslims. Every time, you know, probably for a long time after 9/11, people see, you know, a Muslim woman wearing the, you know, the covering over her face, they're reminded of, ooh, you know, like genocide immediately.
I realize, given how long our lunch breaks are, that I can ride my bike back and forth to school after lunch in broad daylight. The problem is I neglect my keen ability to sweat. I make it right on time for class and walk in drenched like Jim rolling into the Stanford branch. On my way back home, luckily, I hit a curb, fly off my bike, and do a tumble roll in the grass. It was a pretty exciting contrast from sitting down all day. So, Tuesday. I wake up and dread my cold shower, but I take it anyway. David Goggins says to live a good life, you've got to do something that sucks every day. Even when I don't have time to work out, my cold shower is still a good enough suck to hold me over. I get to class and have my second revelation.
I was just in class, and we were talking about a lot of the rules, like, over time that, like, Christians would have for Muslims when Christians were in charge and, like, you know, ruled the land, and vice versa. And so this is my first kind of sneak preview at some of the very negative stereotypes that are associated with Islam and where they may come from. So, again, speaking as basically completely ignorant of what the Quran says, these practices that the Muslims would give, or the laws that the Muslims would give to Christians when the Muslims were in power, were way, way stricter than when it was the other way around. Whenever the Muslims are in power, it is like the rule of law that a Muslim man can marry a Christian woman, but a Christian man cannot marry a Muslim woman. It's illegal to convert a Muslim to Christianity, and it's also illegal to get in the way of a Christian that is trying to convert to Islam. But it wasn't the other way around. It wasn't the other way around when the Christians were in power. The Christians didn't seem, maybe they cared, but they certainly didn't put it into law, conversion either way. But I don't know what it is to be a true Muslim. I think that's the problem, because there are people who go, okay, well, if you're a Muslim that, like, doesn't obey these laws, then you're really not a Muslim. So that's why people judge Islam so harshly. Well, it's like, okay, well, I guess fair point. However, I grew up as a Christian, and I had these very rigid rules that I followed and that I believed, and then I thought, you're not really a Christian if you don't believe these things. However, I've come full circle to the point where I would say I am a Christian. I call myself a Christian, and I know that many Christians would say, well, you're not a Christian for this reason and this reason. And to those people, I'm like, okay, well, I don't really care if you think I'm a Christian or not, because in my opinion, it's not up to you what a Christian is. That's kind of where my negative view of Islam was rooted in. It was rooted in Muslims follow these strict, harsh, and bad laws, and the reason that I can make that sweeping statement, even though some people believe differently, is that by definition, if you don't believe that, then it's like you're not really a Muslim. So it just kind of invalidates the statement of saying, well, I'm a Muslim and I don't believe this. It's like, well, then you're not really a Muslim. I think that's where a lot of the negativity from Islam comes from, is the amount of people with this who still adhere to this kind of strict, very, very strict, like, rules. And I don't know, I guess if you agree with them or you don't mind them, it's like, who cares about the rules? But it's like when you're raising a culture and you're keeping them on these strict rules that maybe you adhere to, but maybe it's going to cause a lot of trouble for them down the line. Like, say, for example, homosexuality. Like, well, I can adhere to Christianity really easily because I'm not gay, and so it doesn't bother me that I'm not allowed to be gay. It's like, well, I'm not gay, so that doesn't bother me, so that's fine. I can be a Christian. But when you're forcing it on your kids and your kids' kids, and this whole culture is based around this thing that just you're okay with, well, what if one of these kids is attracted to the same sex? Well, suddenly you've got a problem on your hands because you made that decision for them. I don't know. I feel like Christianity, especially when it blew apart because of Martin Luther and went into all these different denominations, I feel like because of that, Christianity has actually done a fairly good job of adapting to the times. I mean, there's a whole population, like a big population of Christianity today that's like totally fine with homosexuality. I would say I'm in that camp. I really don't care if someone's gay or not, especially because I'm not classically Christian anyways. But that would have initially been unheard of because it seemed like people thought that the scripture was very clear about it. And there are people who are in Christianity that are willing to kind of adapt their views along to things, moralities of today. That it doesn't seem like there are probably groups of Muslims, but and I'm presenting very ignorant information, but it doesn't seem like there are great populations of Muslims who will adapt much of their very strict rules that they grew up with, that they're used to.
That night, I have an essay to write, but I decide to hang out with some friends first. Possibly a bad call, but sometimes you wonder if life's too short and you've just got to put yourself in hard situations like this. I get back to my place to write my paper, and man, is my mind starting to drift towards those warm covers and sweet, sweet sleep. I start to think about coffee or even a soda to help maintain focus, and I start to wonder how committed to this new caffeine rule I am.
I chug a glass of water, which actually really helped, and I power through.
I get to class and have plenty of new insights about Islam. I genuinely cannot speak highly enough about this class.
And then later, we get the invention of a word to call these people, Hagarenes, which is a play on the Arabic word, Muhajirun. This is the word for the people that completed the Hajj. This is the word that Muslims would actually use to describe themselves. Syriacs and Christians use a similar word that connects them to Hagar.
Later I have some reading to do, so I head off to Front Porch Coffee for caffeine-free hot tea, not coffee, don't worry. While reading, I learn more about Muslims and how they were treated, which leads me to my third revelation.
I think that a lot of Americans got this weird image conjured up in their heads of like most Muslims being like, yeah, like we wouldn't do what the terrorists did, but we kind of agree with what they did. But I'm reading through all this stuff like right after 9/11, like most mosques throughout the U.S. and even all over the world, right after 9/11 hung American flags in and all around their mosques to show solidarity with America and condemn terrorism straight out. They were constantly donating like most of their tithes to 9/11 relief funds and constantly saying, we condemn this. This does not represent our religion. And in fact, it flies in the face of our religion because Allah would not want us to commit such heinous acts.
So a little background on like my history with Islam and what it's looked like. I talked about how 9/11 happened before, or not before I was born, but when I was like tiny. So my whole view on Islam has been shaped by what other people experienced and kind of their biases throughout it. And I just haven't ever done any research on it because the Christian group or the kind of particular denomination of Christianity that I followed never encouraged looking into other religions. It was always kind of, well, other religions are silly and it's kind of crazy they believe what they believe, but our silly claims are not silly at all. But it wasn't just that other religions are silly, because 9/11 kind of added to other religions are silly and Islam is evil.
I think the most interesting thing to me about the issues between Christianity and Islam is that they are essentially worshiping the same God, because both of them are rooted in
the original like Jewish Torah, and all of their original stories come from that. They still believe they were descendants of Adam and of Abraham, and essentially, although they speak of God as Allah and we speak of God as Yahweh, it's still, the same stories, the same God. Muslims even believe in Jesus, and they believe that he did a lot of the things that he said he did. They just don't believe that you could conflate Jesus with God, and that's the problems that Christians have. But Christians don't believe in the sanctity of Muhammad at all. But other than that, we agree on like a lot of the same things. We have a lot of similar practices. It's crazy to think of how much bloodshed over centuries has happened due to just like these little tiny inconsistencies, these little tiny differences these two religions share. I think that's what sticks out to me the most about all of the craziness I've been learning about this week. So if there's any hope to be had, it's that we're essentially worshiping the same God.
Thursday. I have class and then a Zoom meeting with my presentation group. We were presenting on Muslim Americans after 9/11. I finished the rest of my homework at 9:30 and decide that leaves enough time for a 50-minute run and some pull-ups, where I start to listen to the book I've chosen for this month, The Autobiography of Malcolm X. See, something I didn't know about Malcolm X until recently was that he was a Muslim. He and Martin Luther King Jr. sort of represented the two sides of trying to solve a problem, Christian and Muslim. While talking about it in class, I became fascinated and decided to read more about it. Well, listen more about it, but the audiobook is read by Lawrence Fishburne, so can you really blame me? Friday.
I get to class and our professor decides to show us some footage from 9/11 before we present.
We first see the standard news broadcast where they think the first plane was some sort of accident, and then they start to panic when the second plane hits. It's dramatic for sure, but I've seen it basically every year since I was a kid, so I'm pretty used to it. But then she shows us a video I've never seen before. She shows us this footage taken from the ground that day, where everyone is screaming and crying and scrambling and being chased by this giant cloud of smoke that's closing in on them. Everyone is covered in ash and coughing, and I start to feel this frog in my throat. I hear students sniveling and crying behind me, and I don't know that I've ever been so moved by this. Part of me struggles to keep calm because I'm about to present and all, but part of me feels inflamed with anger. But anger for who? That was the issue. The issue is we don't know who to be angry at for 9/11. We heard that it was an act of Muslim faith, but with the information I know now from this class about Muslims and how they disown all of this, as well as any act of violence against any innocent people, well, we can't really blame them. But it wasn't a country that attacked either.
The issues and Islamophobia post 9/11 came from confusion, misguided, and misdirected anger. It's confusing, but it's important to remember that it doesn't represent Islam, and misguided hate does not represent America.
Friday night, I decided to ride the bike for an hour instead of running because my legs had really taken a beating the day before. I then do some push-ups, curls, and head back home. I'm exhausted by this point, so I hit the hay. Today, I got up and ran 8 miles in 37-degree weather. You know, it's funny, I used to think that running in the summer and getting all sweaty meant that I was super tough, but I had no idea what freezing winter runs would be like.
Because it is brutal.
All in all, I accomplished my no caffeine afternoon goal this week. I'm 6 hours into my audiobook for this month, and I'm so excited to share more thoughts about it next week. Stay tuned, don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, follow your goals and be at peace. Later, guys.